and introduction, have co-authored when not in our classrooms. Why intelligent design is wrong for our schools, which is pretty important right now. And she is the recipient of numerous awards from scientists and educators and has been awarded 10 honorary degrees. Lovely number.
Well, unless Susan's here, in which case it's 11.
So, yeah, and if you want to learn more about her, she has a wonderful Wikipedia page. And so this is just a very small part of her career. Now, regarding the questions, as she's seen, has solar eclipse. Yes, in a wonderful location, the Galapagos. I think that's a pretty nice place to see that. An amazing location. And about the zero flight economy, she says, yeah, it's worth almost any discomfort to fly to Australia. Yeah. Especially because you get to see Richard's offers, right? So that's super place. Now, regarding her response to the Jack should be a dog or a cat? He said, why would she choose any of those when she can be a primate? Yeah. What was so primates? Have a most it off day. And here's the dynamic, dedicated defender of Darwinian discourse, Dr. Eugenie Scott.
All right, I'll try to keep on the.
Do what you can.
All righty.
We're doing okay, actually.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So take your time. And
Yeah. Oh, this is. Guess what? This is not a touch screen.
yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah, hang on, fans.
You can also do this.
Yeah, what I want to do is change the screen here.
Ah.
I know what the slides are. I just need my notes.
I get it.
Right.
And you've got
And
some
here we go. All right. Hi. And I'm going to stay put because all of us sitting on this side of the room have this problem with all these people standing in front of the dang screen. So I'm going to stay here. So that it's for you. It's for you. Kitzmiller versus Dover was held in 2005 in the state of Pennsylvania over whether a school district there could require the teaching of a kind of creationism called intelligent design. And the title of my talk, Why Kitzmiller versus Dover is Relevant 20 Years Later, well, why should I be talking about Kitzmiller 20 years later? Because your organizers asked me to. And it's a really interesting talk. And that would be enough. But Dover is a rather small school district in south central Pennsylvania. And as staff member of NCSE Nick Motzke said, Kitzmiller versus Dover is now famous as the first test case on the constitutionality of teaching intelligent design creationism in public schools. Involving a 6-week trial in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, dozens of lawyers and witnesses, 9 expert witnesses, 342 legal documents, 400 exhibits, national and international media, subpoenas, depositions, lies, videotape, bacteria flagellum, the Constitution, civil rights, education, science, religion, history, evolution, the meaning of life, divine intervention, and one recently appointed federal judge. So yeah, the story of Kitzmiller versus Dover is a real banger. And some really zany things took place during the trial, but there are at least 2 other reasons why talking about Dover 20 years later is worthwhile. Contrary to perception, creationism is alive and well in the United States, and recent legal decisions might just give them a new purchase on the possibility of getting their stuff into the public schools. But importantly, for those in or out of the United States, Kitzmiller illustrates a strategy that the ID proponents almost succeeded with, that can and is being used by proponents of other pseudosciences and other social movements. So let's start with the paraphrase of Psalm 8, verse 4. What is ID that I am mindful of it? In the words of intelligent design proponent William Dembski, intelligent design has 3 components. It's a scientific research program that investigates the effects of intelligent action. It's an intellectual movement that challenges Darwinian and materialist legacy, that's humanism, and a way of understanding divine action. Now, only one of these has scientific or philosophical meaning, so I'm going to concentrate on that instead of the other two. Now, in the words of, as a scientific claim, there really are only two ideas in ID, and one is actually a subset of the other. Michael Behe's irreducible complexity is a way of saying that very complicated biological phenomena can't be explained by natural causes, therefore they have to be explained by an intelligent agent. And newsflash, intelligent agent is merely a fancy way of saying God. William Dembski's design inference, sometimes called specified complexity, is essentially the same thing, only instead of talking about biological complexity, Dembski stresses improbability and information theory. Now, Behe writes, by irreducibly complex, I mean a single system composed of several well-matched interacting parts that contribute to the basic function wherein the removal of any one of the parts causes the system to efficiently cease functioning. And his classic example, over and over, is a mousetrap. Now, a mousetrap has 5 parts. And so it's got a spring and a hammer, a hold-down bar, platform, etc. And Behe says that because all 5 of these parts have to be together at in order to catch mice, you have to have all 5 of these parts. If you're missing one part, you don't catch mice. So you don't have a functioning mousetrap. And he uses this as an analogy for biologically complex structures that he says cannot be produced by natural selection because you can't make a mousetrap by just adding one part to another. Now, this idea stimulated quite a cottage industry coming up with reduced mousetraps. If you take away the catch where the cheese is put and just put the cheese on the hold-down bar, you're going to get a dead mouse. And there's a whole bunch of other potentially reduced mousetrap. None of them work as well as the 5-part mousetrap, but they do allow you to kill mice. And the answer to the question of, is a mousetrap irreducibly complex? Apparently not. But of course, Behe is not really talking about mousetraps. He's really talking about complex biological systems like the bacterial flagellum. And this is a little motor that makes this little filament spin and makes a bacterium go through a liquid medium. Now, it's got scores of proteins, lots of moving parts, literally. And if you take away any single part, and he's right, if you take away any single part, the bacterium is just going to sit there in the water. It's not going to move. It is irreducibly complex, according to Behe. And he says, therefore, it could not have been produced by natural selection. Now, scientists have actually come up with a step-by-step evolutionary explanation of how you can get a bacterial flagellum, but I'll get to that a little bit later. I want to talk about the structure of this argument because there's some major problems with it, only a couple of which I'll be able to talk about today. Now, schematically, the ID proponents are claiming that irreducible complexity or Dembski's specified complexity could be produced either by chance, by natural selection, or intelligent design. Now, everybody agrees that chance is not going to produce complex biological structures. Duh. They don't. All these proteins and molecules don't just fall together and, oh gosh, it works. So we all agree with that. And ID proponents also claim that natural selection can't produce a complex structure, and therefore intelligent design wins. Now, most scientists actually believe that natural selection can produce these structures. And indeed, it's possible for natural selection to produce even a complex structure like the bacterial flagellum. Palin and Motzky in this paper in Nature present an evolutionary natural selective explanation for how the bacterial flagellum could have evolved, which of course Behe doesn't accept. But other complex, irreducibly complex alleged structures like the blood clotting cascade, the immune system, and so on, that have plausible evolutionary histories. Now, during the trial, one of our witnesses had presented a very detailed discussion of the immune system and showing that it was not actually irreducibly complex, that there were components of the immune system relatives of those components that were perfectly fine functioning structures in other contexts that you could plausibly argue could have been incorporated into something like a primitive immune system that eventually could have, through the process of natural selection, become more powerful. And of course, Behe insisted that there was no evolutionary explanation. During our cross-examination of Behe, our lawyer put a stack of 58 peer-reviewed publications, 12 books, and several immunology textbook chapters about the evolution of the immune system. He asked permission of the judge, may I approach the witness? Yes, sir. And he carried this big stack of things over there and went kerplop down right in front of Behe and said, is this enough? And Behe's response said, no, this is still not sufficient. Shall we say, didn't impress the judge. So natural selection can explain some of the supposedly irreducibly complex structures that ID claim require intelligence. But there's another problem with this overall view, and that is eliminating alternatives doesn't logically prove intelligent design. Let's say for the sake of argument that natural selection doesn't actually explain supposedly irreducibly complex structures. What if there was an as yet unknown structure that can or could explain irreducibly complex structures? That is the nature of science. We don't say, well, gosh, we don't understand how this works, so I guess there's no possible explanation for it. No, we have to go out and look for that explanation. And the proper term, the proper phrase for a scientist to use at a point where something is not yet explained is, I don't know yet. And if you don't remember anything else about this talk, if you would kindly remember the phrase, unexplained is not unexplainable, I will go home happy. Furthermore, if intelligent design is actually going to be taken seriously as a scientific explanation, they have to go beyond the you're wrong, so I'm right. They have to come up with an actual mechanism themselves. How is ID a mechanism? How does it work? What did the designer do, and when did he do it? And intelligent design proponents are absolutely mute, maybe mute as well. They're mute about this. Their position basically is that there are no natural causes, so we win by default. And that's not the way we do science. There's a lot more to say about the philosophical and scientific shortcomings of ID, but this is actually not a whole talk about ID, but I do encourage you to look at the voluminous literature critiquing this. When confronted with criticisms, ID proponents have not dealt with them, which of course, again, is not how science works. The goal of science is to explain nature. And this little chart here from the Kansas Citizens for Science, I think expresses very well. Intelligent design has not proposed any explanations of nature whatsoever. Their major point is evolution can't do it, therefore must be us. We win. All right, so that's a little bit about intelligent design. Let's take a look at the Kitzmiller trial itself. Now, Kitzmiller versus Dover became something of a cultural icon, with references to it appearing in some rather unusual places. It was at the time a very large news story, and all of the networks and major print publications, and even a number of international media covering the case. The Daily Show with Jon Stewart had a segment on intelligent design the week that the trial began. There's a 2-hour Nova documentary called Judgment Day that's quite good. It won a Peabody Award and also other awards as well. And this is for Susan. There's a Trivial Pursuit a question in a box that came out shortly around the time of the trial. What topic was banned from a Pennsylvania district science class in 2005 on the grounds that it violated the separation of church and state? And the answer, of course, is intelligent design. So now you know if you ever have to answer a question in Trivial Pursuit about Pennsylvania. Dang, and I wasn't even very loud just then. This is a very tricky microphone, by the way. You've noticed that with the other speakers. At NCSE, we had started a file on the Dover district in 2002 when a student-painted mural disappeared over the summer vacation and was taken out to the schoolyard and burned. And it wasn't only until many years later that we found it the janitor did it. But it did put, we decided at that point we'd better keep an eye on Dover. And indeed, 2 years later, in 2004, it was time to adopt new biology textbooks, and the teachers wanted to get the most recent edition of the book they had been using, which is Miller and Levine's Biology. Well, school board member Bill Buckingham was not keen on that. He claimed that Miller and Levine was laced with Darwinism. And well, you may gasp. He suggested that if you're going to use Miller and Levine, you'd better also balance it with Of Pandas and People, which would teach the students this new science called intelligent design. Now, after much squabbling about textbooks and pushback from teachers over the use of Pandas and People, the school board did pass a policy in October 2004 that read, students will be made aware of gaps/problems in Darwin's theory and of other theories of evolution, including, but not limited to, intelligent design. And a school board member arranged for copies of Pandas to be donated to the school. And the teachers just basically took a look at the book, left the books in the boxes and ignored it, and that kind of pissed off the school board. So they came up with a statement, basically a disclaimer on evolution, that they wanted the students to read to the kids before they started teaching about the E word. The teachers refused. And I hope you appreciate what a very brave thing that was for them to do. There was one teacher in the science department who had tenure. So this was a very gutsy thing for a lot of young professionals to do. But there was no way they could see teaching, reading that statement, teaching ID or anything of the sort. The school board was recalcitrant, and there was nothing to do but sue. By the way, footnote, don't sue if you can possibly help it. It's expensive, it's exhausting. Chances are you might make bad law. Newsflash, we didn't. But it's, if you can possibly solve these kinds of problems backstage, behind the scenes, do it. So we had been working with citizens in Dover, and we helped put together a legal team consisting of us, the NCSE, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the ACLU, and a big law firm in Philadelphia, Pepper Hamilton, on which one of our legal advisory committee members was an associate. And there's a good story about how we became involved in this case. On the other side was the Thomas More Law Center for Michigan, whose motto is the sword and shield for people of faith. Read by Richard Thompson, and also involved in the trial was Patrick Gillen and Robert Muse. Now, why couldn't we just go to the judge and say, Judge, intelligent design is dumb. There's no good reason to teach it. Tell the school board to knock it off. However sensible that would be. In the United States, there is no law that says you can't teach bad science. There is a law. There probably isn't a law here either. There is a law, though, that says you can't advocate religion in the public schools, and that law is the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. Now, there's two clauses in the First Amendment about religion. One is the Establishment Clause, the other is the Free Exercise Clause. And when you take them together, they mean that public institutions, governmental institutions, need to be religiously neutral. They cannot advance nor inhibit religion in the public schools. That's what establishment and free exercise are all about. Now, obviously, you can teach about any religious idea. I can teach about creationism, about intelligent design, about Mohammed, about Jesus, whatever. I just can't say Mohammed was right. I can't advocate religion. Now, the Supreme Court had ruled in 1987 that a type of creationism called creation science was a form of creationism and thus unconstitutional to teach in the public schools. And our position was that intelligent design was not distinct from creation science, and because creation science in Edwards versus Aguilard had already been knocked down, we would win if we could tie intelligent design to creation science. The relationship between creationism, creation science, and ID was pretty clear to anybody who is familiar with the issue. As this political cartoonist also got it right about the proponents, as people trying to get religion into the science classroom. The defense had to demonstrate that Dover was teaching intelligent design not to advance religion, but for a secular reason. It was good pedagogy to teach ID. They had to demonstrate that ID is valid science. There obviously would not be any reason to teach it if it wasn't valid science. There's no pedagogical reason to teaching bad science. So they had to prove that ID had the stuff. And if there were religious implications, that's okay. I mean, evolution has religious implications and it's being taught. Just so long as it's good science and being taught for pedagogical reasons, it should be constitutional to teach. Further, they also planned to show that evolution was weak science. Remember that original statement about evolution having gaps/problems? Well, that is why we knew that they were going to attack evolution. Anticipating this approach, we would show that intelligent design is in fact religion. In fact, it was a form of creation science because that would get Edwards on our side. And since the other side was going to claim that Dover was teaching ID for good pedagogical scientific reasons because it was such great science, we had to show that it wasn't science. That meant we had to define science, and one of our criteria was to make it clear to the judge that science is restricted to natural causes. Once you bring in the intelligent designer, the only intelligent designer who could produce something like complicated biological structures was an omnipotent deity, then you immediately took yourself out of science and placed yourself into a different realm of explanation. And all of our witnesses, even the historian, the education specialist, and the theologian, all made this same point about how science had to be done in a purely naturalistic context. We also had to show that intelligent design was factually wrong because there's no pedagogical reason for miseducating students. And we also had to defend evolution because we knew they were going to attack it. We had to deal with that gaps/problems in evolution language. There was a lot of science produced in this, presented to the judge. At the end of the first day of testimony, if any of you have heard Ken Miller speak, he's Miller of Miller and Levine. He wrote the textbook, but he was also a board member of NCSC and an old friend, and a strong evolution education defender, and a practicing Catholic. But he is super enthusiastic. If you've ever heard him speak, he's really great. And he's a cell biologist, so he really gets off on these tiny little structures. He's going on and on. At the end of a very enthusiastic day of Ken Miller testimony on cell biology, the judge sort of was telling everybody, okay, that's it for today. We'll meet at whatever o'clock tomorrow. Class dismissed. The judge was really fun. There's some good stories about the judge. It was like the biology class you wish you could have taken, said the writer for the New Yorker. Now, in preparation for the Dover trial, NCSC scoured its archives and found a very interesting article in the Creation Science newsletter Students for Origins Research from 1981. The Foundation for Thought and Ethics was preparing a biology textbook. Now, the Foundation for Thought and Ethics, FTE, is the publisher of Pandas and People. And there was sort of a, oh really kind of moment. I wonder if this could be an ancestral Pandas and People. The textbook was described as being sensitively written to present both evolution and creation while limiting discussion to scientific data. This, of course, is vintage creation science. That's what creation science is all about. We can show special creation only using science. Therefore, we deserve to be in the public schools. This looked very much like an ancestral form of pandas. Now remember, our goal was to tie ID to creation science so that we could use Edwards to have it declared unconstitutional to teach. If we could have found an early version of this biology and origins textbook, then we might be able to show a relationship to pandas and people. So that afternoon, literally, our lawyers subpoenaed any back copies of biology and origins that the Foundation for Thought and Ethics might still have in its files. They didn't like that very much. And in fact, they countersued to prevent us from getting it, but we won, and FTE had to cough up the manuscripts. To their credit, they followed the law. not only did they give us Biology and Origins, but they gave us a whole bunch of other manuscripts and early manuscripts, early drafts of Pandas and People. The Lord hath delivered them into my hands. Turns out there were 2 manuscripts before Biology and Origins that made the connection between pandas and creation science even stronger. Creation biology and biology and creation there. One of my staff members, Wes Ellsbury, and I remember this is back in like 2004, so you couldn't just go to the internet and find a script that would show you the distribution of words and phrases of manuscripts across several different. He wrote the script to do all of this, and he looked for the inclusion of the words creation and cognates and the phrase intelligent design and cognates. And notice a very interesting thing. These 2 lines cross, and intelligent design becomes the more frequent term in these manuscripts. In 1987, sharp-eared listeners will recall that 1987 is Edwards versus Aguillard striking down creation science. This was really great for our side because it did show something is very suspicious about this series of manuscripts. Apparently, the authors just changed the phrasing and didn't even, bother changing much of anything else. In the 1986 Biology and Creation draft, creation is defined. This is another comparison that we used. Creation means that the various forms of life began abruptly through the agency of an intelligent creator with their distinctive features already intact. Fish with fins and scales, birds with feathers, beaks and wings, etc. This wording remains through Biology and Origins, 1987, and in the first draft of the book entitled Of Pandas and People. But in the second draft of Pandas and People, which was published, which was written in late 1987, remember that date, it's significant here. Intelligent design means that various forms of life began abruptly through an intelligent agency with their distinctive features already intact. Fish with fins and scales, birds with feathers, beaks, and we were bouncing around the office saying, birds with feathers, they're just so great. I was sitting, needless to say, right behind our lawyers in the courtroom, and we had prepared all. These are the literal slides that we showed. No, I'm sorry, that's my reworking, but those are basically what we showed. We showed facsimile in the trial. The judge was a guy who he was very even-handed. Both sides agreed that it was a very well-run trial. He let the other side protest and, fine, he did a very good job administering, but he kind of kept his cards close to his chest. But I was sitting there in the front row and I was watching the judge as these slides came up, and I saw one eyebrow go up. Another fun discovery we made is in the 1983 creation biology draft was this phrase: evolutionists think the former is correct, creationists conclude the latter is correct. The 86 biology and creation draft is pretty much the same phrase. Evolutionists think the former is correct, creationists accept the latter view. And it's also in the first draft of Pandas in 87. Evolutionists think the former is correct, creationists accept the latter view. It's going to get better. Just hang in there. This changes in the second post-Supreme Court decision of Pandas. Evolutionists think the former is correct, co-design proponentsists accept the latter view. This is not only a way to not use block and paste, it was also a superb example of the missing link between creation science and evolution. And can you imagine what the judge thought when he saw that? Well, nothing, because we actually didn't use this in the trial. It's become sort of an urban legend that we use the co-design proponentsists in the trial, but we didn't. And I mean, we wanted to, oh God, the NCSC staff really wanted to. But the lawyer said, no, we're already just hammering this word change thing to the judge. We don't want to overdo it. We don't want to pick on these guys to some degree. This is a court of law. There are things you do and don't do. What can I say? But the story is true. This was really in those manuscripts. So the story is true. The urban legend part is whether we used it in the trial, and we didn't use it in the trial. But it's much too good to not share. Now, this was not a case one just on the science. There was plenty of ammunition against the policy being religious from the actions of the school board members themselves, and including lying about the origin of the check that was used to buy the books for Pandas and People and so forth. And others had made religious statements about the importance of teaching some form of creationism in school board meetings. And reporters had judiciously taken all this down and published it in the newspapers. And citizens had heard them making these statements. But a funny thing happened. Normally, all of the school board meetings in Dover, Pennsylvania are recorded. But would you believe the specific meetings in which these very religious statements from school board members, we didn't find tapes of them. They must have disappeared. Who knew? So it became a he said, she said sort of thing. The school board member says, we never said anything like that. The reporter said, oh yeah, you did. And the people who attended the meeting, yeah, we heard him say that. Fortunately, the judge listened to the preponderance of evidence, shall we say, which was very clear that these guys had a religious axe to grind. And there was even a videotape of Mr. Buckingham saying, this would, we should really be introducing creationism as well. And if we hadn't found that, that was also a very good thing. Well, you probably know the answer, the end of this. Science won, intelligent design lost, and this little gray-haired lady over in the corner is very, very happy and smiling widely for a very good reason, because it was a huge victory. The judge's decision was 130 plus pages, carefully argued and devastating to the intelligent design cause. Among other points, the judge wrote, ID is not science and cannot be adjudged a valid, accepted scientific theory, as it has failed to publish in peer-reviewed journals, engage in research and testing, and gain acceptance in the scientific community. We basically wrote that. That was, part of our definition of science. ID, as noted, is grounded in theology, not science. Accepting for the sake of argument its proponents as well as defendants' argument that to introduce ID to students will encourage critical thinking, it still has utterly no place in a science curriculum. Go Judge Jones. We successfully demonstrated that first, ID was a movement outside of science, with no valid scientific discoveries or contributions. At heart, it was a religious movement and was unconstitutional to teach in public schools. The decision wasn't appealed, unfortunately, so it is precedent only in the Middle District of Pennsylvania, which broke our hearts, but there you have it. The school board election of the following November, this trial took place in October of '05. The November election voted the rascals out. The new school board was not interested in either the expense, they just wanted to put all this behind them. So it's precedent only in the Middle District of Pennsylvania, which is about this big. But it is such a well-argued decision that it has been, if not dispositive, at least extraordinarily dissuasive to other districts. And this was important because we knew at NCSC that Indiana, Louisiana, and Utah were already poised to introduce state legislation promoting the teaching of ID. And doubtless there are many other districts that would have been really happy to jump into ID had we lost Kitzmiller. So that Kitzmiller was very important. It basically ground the efforts to get ID into the classroom, into the ground, so to speak. That's the wrong words, but there you have it. However, recent legal decisions have me and many other people worried. Background. There have been a series of legal decisions about the teaching of evolution over the past century. And in every single one, 100% of them, creationism has lost. The reason, of course, is the Establishment Clause. And up until 2022, the precedent used for interpreting the Establishment Clause was a case from 1971 called Lemon versus Kurtzman. Now, this is a test that was used to determine whether a practice or law was unconstitutional by the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Does the practice or the law have a religious purpose? Does it have the effect of advancing or inhibiting religion? Does it cause undue entanglement of the government with religion? And there have been criticisms of Lemon, but if there's one place that Lemon works really, really well, it's in creationism and evolution cases. Every single case past 1971 has cited Lemon versus Kurtzman as its precedent for striking down the law or the practice. In every single one of these cases, bar none, there was a religious purpose. In most of the cases, there was also a religious effect, and for a lot of the an awful lot of the cases, there was an entanglement issue as well. So Lemon has been very important in keeping creationism out of our schools. Now, those of us who have been concerned about the creation and evolution controversy and the importance of the Lemon precedent have been nervous for decades because we know that there were Supreme Court justices that did not like Lemon and were looking for a test case, and they found one. In June of 22, the Supreme Court issued a decision in Kennedy versus Bremerton. This was the case you might have heard about involving the football coach who insisted on praying with his students. Coach Joe was an assistant football coach at Bremerton High School, which is near Seattle. He was a part-time, part of the year assistant football coach. He had a day job. He was not losing his job. He looked at his position as a way to proselytize students. In an op-ed for Fox News, he wrote, quote, "Before I coached my first game in 2008, I made a commitment to God that I would give thanks after each game, win or lose, for the opportunity to be a football coach and for my players." He would pray with the students in the locker room before the game, and after the game would pray at the 50-yard line because he had promised God he would. He would invite students from his team and from the opposing team and their coach to pray with him after the game. And in 2015, a coach from another school just happened to run into the principal from Bremerton and said, "Thought that was pretty cool, the way that they let Coach Joe pray with the kids on the 50-yard line." And the principal said, "What?" This was news to the principal. So there was a lot of back and forth at this point as the principal said, "Say, Joe, we want you to not pray with the students. This is an establishment. We don't want the cost of a lawsuit and screw around with, the expense and everything. So this is clearly an Establishment Clause issue. Knock it off." He didn't. He was supported by a religious right organization that came in to support him pro bono, as we are familiar. The district told him to knock it off. He didn't. He kept doing it. So they suspended him with pay for the rest of the year, and the following year did not renew his contract. And he sued on free speech and free speech and free exercise grounds. And obviously the district was trying to argue the establishment case. The Supreme Court used the situation to strike down Lemon, which, as I say, has been the jurisprudence since 1971. Striking down long-established precedent is a serious matter. It is a very big deal. As Justice Sotomayor stated in her dissent to Kennedy, the court rejects long-standing concerns surrounding government endorsement of religion and replaces the standard for reviewing such questions with a new history and tradition test. Again, the long history of creation and evolution cases decided by Lemon. If you dump Lemon and switch to history and tradition, what does that mean in the context of creationism and evolution? There were no public schools in the 1700s when the First Amendment was written. There was no evolution. No one had everything was creationism. Does that give them? Let's not go there. Let's hope not. The problem is that history and tradition is ripe for cherry picking. It's very easy to look through and pick out the history and tradition that supports your point of view. This is basically left First Amendment jurisprudence in just a mess right now. Nobody really knows what to do. And you don't have to take my word for it. I'm not the only one to feel this way. Judge John Jones published an article shortly after Kennedy lamenting the demise of Lemon. He wrote, "I would respectfully submit, as one who used the Lemon test and found it to be soundly crafted, that this new approach will lead to increasingly disparate decisions by lower court judges that will be based on ad hoc analysis and excessively subjective findings." I'm worried too, John. Conservatives have hailed it, obviously. First Liberty Institute lawyer Matt Krause wrote, "The law has undergone a massive shift. It's not too much to say the Kennedy case for religious liberty was much like the Dobbs case was for the pro-life movement." So Kennedy is a big deal. And in fact, we've seen some glimmers of what may lie ahead as legislatures propose creationism-friendly legislation. In 2023, West Virginia's Senate Bill 619 allows teachers K-12 to teach intelligent design, quote, "as a theory of how the universe or humanity came to exist." It died. But it came back again in 2024 with a new number and passed the Senate Education Committee, which changed it from an explicitly ID bill to wording that teachers, quote, "can't prohibit discussion of scientific theories of the origin of the universe or life." And which sounds kind of neutral, but it isn't if you know the history of this controversy. The author of the bill explained to the press that this would allow teachers to teach intelligent design. Oklahoma Senate Bill 1871, if you teach evolution, you have to teach creationism or intelligent design. It died, fortunately. But in 2025, they're still going strong. North Dakota passed a bill, include intelligent design, North Dakota SB 2355, quote, "include intelligent design in the state science content standards for elementary, middle, and high school students." The Senate defeated this by only 3 votes. That came much, much too close. And the state of Iowa has removed climate change and the word evolution from its science education standards. So it certainly appears that Kennedy versus Bremerton has been something of an inspiration, and that creationism is nudging back. Sooner or later, there's going to be an explicitly creationist or ID bill that will show up. And sooner or later, somebody is going to have to challenge it in court, and sooner or later it will make its way through the courts, and it's going to be faced by this exciting new criterion of history and tradition. And how will the courts rule? Who knows? Right now, Establishment Clause jurisprudence, as I say, is floundering. So stay tuned and hope with me that I am dead wrong. I would never be happier than to be dead wrong about this and be an erroneous Cassandra. Cassandra was not listened to, but she was right. I want to be the other way around. Listen to me, but let's hope I'm wrong. Now, so Kitzmiller was an interesting trial, but you may remember that I mentioned there are at least 2 other reasons to be mindful of it. As I just discussed, creationists haven't gone away, and they may be given a new breath of life here with the demise of Lemon. But I think importantly, for those in or outside of the US, and we've heard many examples of science-related controversies today, Kitzmiller illustrates a strategy that the intelligent design proponents found very persuasive with the general public, and which is also being used by proponents of other science-related controversies and pseudosciences and social movements. Regardless of the law, public sentiment is extremely important in these kinds of controversies, and we need to be prepared to deal with this strategy because it is effective. There are lots of things that people get wrong. Remember that old Woody Allen joke? I just took the Evelyn Woods Reading Dynamics course. I read War and Peace in 4 hours. It's about Russia. We only use 10% of our brains, et cetera. There's a lot of things that we think that many of us think are true that we're wrong about. But for a lot of things, you can explain why they're wrong, and people will say, oh yeah, okay, fine. But then there's a whole lot of things that are wrong, and if you try to explain to people, they don't necessarily change their minds. Why can we change our minds about some things, but we have a tough time changing our minds about others? And these ideas have floated around with numerous presenters today, which is great. What is it about this other set of ideas that generates resistance to correction. There are lots of psychological behaviors that get in the way of changing your mind about something, that get in the way of knowledge resistance. Now, you've all heard of motivated reasoning, confirmation bias. Really, this is a whole suite of terms that are used for roughly the same kinds of thing. They all refer to the same basic phenomenon, and that is that factual information is viewed through a filter, through ideological, value-laden, or group identification filters. And the ideas we are reluctant to change are the ones that have negative consequences or otherwise challenge our ideologies, our values, or our social identification. Identification, understandably, includes livelihood. We can change our ideas more easily about speed reading or using 10% of our brains at any one time than we can about the prospect of losing a job in the oil industry, which is why Alberta has a much lower rate of concern about climate change, 55%, compared to Quebec, which is 84%. This is 2023 data by Leger. So group identification, values, and ideology all stand in the way of accepting and understanding factual information. At NCSC, we find we can group the strategies used by either evolution or climate change deniers into three pillars of denial. The first, of course, is to question the science. Science is weak. People are giving up on evolution. We all know that climate change is bogus. My favorite, of course, is that evolutionary and climate change scientists are in it for the money. As we all know, scientific research is a well-known get-rich scheme, right? Oddly enough, this is the one that's easiest to deal with. There's lots of factual knowledge that you can use to refute this pillar. But let me reassure you, or assure you, no parent ever showed up at the school board meeting because they were so passionate about how the Cambrian explosion was being taught. They really don't show up at your school board meeting because they really want the medieval warm period to be taught about climate change. What motivates people to show up at those meetings about these or any other cause are ideology, values, and group identification. The main ideology and group identification for creationism, of course, is religion. And the main ideology and group identification for climate change is conservative politics. Anti-evolution Christians, which, by the way, is a minority of Christians, the majority of Christians belong to disciplines, belong to denominations that are not anti-evolution, but for the anti-evolution Christians, they believe that Christianity stands or falls on the literal truth of Genesis. So if Genesis is not true, that means the Bible is false. If the Bible is false, that means Revelations is not true. If the Revelations is not true, that means there's no salvation, there's no afterlife. If children are taught evolution and believe it, and they give up their faith, they will become bad people because they will have no foundation for ethics and morals, and they will not be saved. They will burn in hell, and you will not see them at the end times. You can really understand why religiously conservative Christians are very worried about the teaching of evolution. The stakes are very high. If evolution is correct, they lose big. The motivation is very high. For climate change, it's not religion that is the motivating ideology. It's political conservatism. Things like small government, individual liberty, capitalism, strong security. They believe that if climate change is true, then government's going to have to get bigger. They're going to restrict our personal freedoms. They're going to tell you what kind of car to buy and what kind of light bulbs to buy. And maybe even flush toilets that you have to flush 19 times. So, and this, they're going to infringe on the carbon-producing industries, which is anti-capitalist, and this will endanger our national security because we will have these unreliable energy sources. So political conservatives like Republicans find the consequences of climate change to be unacceptable. Therefore, climate change can't be true. Just like conservative religious people find the consequences of evolution to be unacceptable, so evolution cannot be true. It's a high bar to overcome those ideological commitments. The third pillar of denial is culture, basically, and this is where values come in. For Americans and Canadians, fairness and freedom of expression are highly valued. These are the values pressed into service to promote creationism, intelligent design, climate change, denialism, anti-vaccination, anti-GMO, lots of medical fraud, on and on. Originally, creation science contended that because of opposition to evolution, it was only fair to teach both. And this was resonant. It seemed like it was extremely good framing on their part. They got more mileage out of that than it got out of anything else, because it incorporated values that everybody in the society held, even though not everybody in the society had their particular religious views. Teaching both was also promoted as a vehicle for critical thinking. Both teachers and students were incorporated into this critical thinking thing. Don't muzzle teachers when they want to teach creationism. You are infringing upon their academic freedom. Let the students hear this new information and let them decide. So critical thinking was very popular. And under the guise of critical thinking, anti-evolutionists have come up with a number of euphemisms that allow them to sneak in creationism and intelligent design. Critically analyze, by the way, critically analyzing evidence for evolution, translation of that is criticize evolution. I've seen their materials. Teach the strengths and weaknesses. Now, interestingly enough, these all sound like good critical thinking kinds of things to do. And as I say, they're resonant with the population as a whole. However, these euphemisms, in effect, would require the teaching of creation science or intelligent design, because only in those literatures can you find strengths and weaknesses of evolution. I assure you, you go to any science journal and you're looking in the index for weaknesses. Oh, go away. Okay. I set a timer. Good for me. And I'm getting to the end. All right. That's really quite an alarming timer set, isn't it? Only in creationism or ID can you find the weaknesses of evolution in these other euphemisms. And this is part of the free speak thing. We also like fair play. We don't like it when you don't let people have their say. The 2007 documentary Expelled, with actor Ben Stein, takes the position that ID scientists and ID itself has been unfairly muzzled by the scientific community. Journals won't accept their articles. They don't get hired. They don't get promoted. Their research is restricted if they mention that they have an interest in ID. The establishment is not letting these ideas be expressed. You know, as a child of the 60s, you don't know how hard it was for me to be considered part of the establishment, okay? This did not fit well when I was working at NCSE. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, you just... Oh, I actually set go. Yes. I actually set a passcode on my cell phone, which I don't usually do, just in case somebody wanted to check my phone on the way back into the country. I am not usually that paranoid. I really am not. But anyway. Yeah, give me a hug when I'm done, all right? She's right. She's right. All right. Fairness, freedom of expression, the ID people and creationism people have gotten a lot of mileage out of this approach. All right, let me move on here. So what can we do about this? Creationism, ID, anti-vax, climate change, anti-GMO, homeopathy, many others, they're never going to win on the science, okay? They've already lost on the science. But they can, and sometimes do, win on the ideology and values front. Right now, there's the promotion of defluoridation on the grounds of personal choice. Personal choice is a biggie in North America, right? Do not underestimate the importance of these factors. You know that cartoon, Someone is Wrong on the Internet? The stick figure. So, I can't go to bed, someone is wrong on the Internet. It's not the facts that change people's mind. Ultimately, questions like this are going to be decided by public opinion, not the courts, not in the like the good old days of the evolution wars. We need to help our fellow citizens understand why we believe critical thinking and facts should take priority in decisions involving controversial issues. And the way we do this is through more effective communication. I'm repeating points made by some of my predecessors. Communication specialists tell us that in order to have any hope of changing people's minds when it's this class of problems that are motivated by ideology, group identification, and so forth, simple messages from a trusted messenger repeated often. Simple messages from a trusted messenger repeated often. I would add, be patient, okay? Oops. Oh, damn. Wrong buttons, okay. I don't do this for a living anymore, it's all right. I'm rusty, that's okay. I would add be patient because no one ever had their mind changed in one pass, okay? Someone is wrong on the internet, be patient. You're not going to change them by staying up after midnight with that last little fact. Maybe the next time, the best you can hope is that you can crack the door a little bit. And maybe the next time that person hears these same arguments from somebody else or reads them, the door will be cracked a little bit wider, and that's worthwhile. So patience. Now, you know somebody who's really good at simple messages from a trusted messenger, repeated often? This guy. And he's considered a trusted messenger by the people other people. And it's one reason why he's very effective. Now, a good example of effective messaging was the California anti-smoking campaign back in the 1990s. Simple messages. The tobacco industry lies, nicotine is effective, secondhand smoke kills. It was delivered by a trusted messenger, the California Department of Public Health, which back in the 90s, 2000s, public institutions weren't automatically suspect quite yet. And they were repeated often. And the campaign, in fact, continues into the 21st century broadly on social media. And the incidence of smoking and tobacco use in California is very low compared to other states. Ed Maybach at the George Mason Center for Climate Change has some simple messages for communicating the importance of climate change. It's happening, it's real, it's us, it's bad, and it's solvable. And then they've worked through these with specific examples for how to get these points across. Like, for example, it's bad. People respond better if you say it's bad for people. Don't build on the coast because you'll lose your home. There are health problems with increased climate, with warming and so forth. And there's other examples as well. Okay, this is our legal team. Actually, I'm back there. Never mind, I'm in there someplace. We won in Kitzmiller because we had the law on our side. Now, after Kennedy versus Bremerton, we're in a legal no man's land. We'll probably look back at 2005 as the good old days. But whatever happens to the creationism evolution controversy in the US, I believe that it holds lessons for us regarding the need to combat the strategy that anti-evolutionists have used very successfully. And that's to focus not so much on the science, but rather on the motivations that people have for rejecting the science. The ideologies, values, and group identification, cultural issues that resonate with people. Until they are recognized, identified, and dealt with effectively, we're going to continue to struggle with science-related controversies like climate change, vaccines, fluoridation, GMOs, and so forth. So please, consider the lessons of a 20-year-old trial on a topic that you may not need to directly deal with yourself, although I hear in Alberta creationism's on the rise, so call me. But which nonetheless, I think, holds lessons for all of us going forward. And thank you so much for inviting me back. I missed last year. I inconveniently got a little medical problem that is fine now, but thanks for letting me try again. And thank you very much for being such an attentive audience. Goodbye.